Alright, welcome back to my economics class. This is Dr. Kling, and we're still discussing some basic economic concepts, and the one today is arbitrage. Okay, arbitrage. Arbitrage means to exploit a price discrepancy. For one good selling in different places or in different circumstances. So suppose we had two stores. I'm not a very good artist, but we'll have our two stores look like this. And they're both selling shoes. And this one is selling the same pair of shoes cheap, and this one is selling those shoes and they're expensive. So what do? If you want those particular shoes, you buy them in the cheap place. Okay, you might think, well, you're exploiting the price discrepancy, but you're not. You're taking advantage of the better deal. You're buying at the cheaper place. If you really wanted to exploit the price discrepancy, you would buy them at the cheap store and then return them at the expensive store, and then you'd come back and buy more at the cheap store, return at the expensive store, and so on. And so let's say you buy them for 40, return them for 50, buy them for 40, return them for 50. And as long as you can keep doing that, you are in a very safe, comparatively easy profit. Okay, so one characteristic of arbitrage is that you get a safe and easy profit. So it's a great business to be in. So arbitrage gets a safe, easy profit. But also arbitrage leads to prices tend to equate. If people could really do this, if they could really buy at the cheap store and then return at the expensive store, sooner or later somebody would figure something out. The people at the expensive store might lower the price at which they're willing to accept returns, or the people at the cheap store would raise the price at which they would sell the shoes. And so eventually the prices would probably be equalized. So let's say they were $45 at each store, something like that. An arbitrageur will tend to cause price discrepancies to go away. So that's what we believe about arbitrage. And one case of that relates to the rent versus buy calculation that we did in an earlier lecture. So when we said rent versus buy, you say you buy if the rental rate plus the appreciation is greater than the interest cost. Now, of course, appreciation has to do with the future change of the price. So that's something that you can't necessarily know for sure. But if everyone agreed on what the appreciation rate would be, and everyone understood what the rental rate was, everyone understood the interest cost, and everyone did the optimal thing of buying versus renting. So let's say that this was that. So we buy, not equals, we buy if the rental rate plus the appreciation rate is greater than the interest cost. So if we had a situation where this is true, where it's clear that, let's say if you let's say you bought a condo and your rental rate was 5%, the appreciation rate you could be sure was 2%, and the interest cost was only 6%, then people would buy condos, and they would then rent them out to poor innocent renters who would be exploited. But as they do that, as people start to buy condos, the ratio of the rent to the price, well, as they buy them, the price goes up, so the ratio, the entire ratio goes down, and as it gets driven down, the advantage of buying disappears. Or if we had it the other way around, let's say that the rental rate was 3%, the appreciation was 2%, and the interest cost is 6%. People who were looking for a place to live would choose to rent rather than buy, because they can see that buying is just going to cost them money, so they rent, and the result of that is that bids up the rental rate and relative to the price, and so the rental rate moves up. And so if we take it as given that the appreciation rate is 2% and the interest cost is 6%, and we want there to be no particular advantage to buying and no particular advantage to renting, then the ratio of rent to price has to settle at 4%. And so we can call that rent-buy arbitrage. And that what that results in, the result of rent-buy arbitrage is that the rental rate will equal the interest cost minus appreciation. What I've done is, if we want there to be no rent-buy arbitrage, that is, no clear advantage to renting or buying, then we want to set the rental rate plus appreciation minus interest cost equal to 0, and then if you play with the algebra, that'll tell you that the rental rate is equal to the interest cost, moving interest cost over to the right, minus appreciation, moving appreciation over to the right. And that's so what that tells you is that, to a first approximation, if you're investing, if you're buying an asset, if you're an entrepreneur who's, let's say, you're putting some kind of strip mall business together and you've got to buy some equipment, let's say a cash register, or you're trying to decide whether to rent or own the space in which you're going to put your shop. What this rent-buy arbitrage says that it really shouldn't matter that whether you rent your capital equipment or you buy it. When you rent it, it should end up costing about the same as buying, which means that the rental rate should work out to be the difference between interest cost and appreciation. So that will enable us to guess what the rental cost of capital will be, and it will make it easier if we're trying to estimate what an entrepreneur is going to have to pay for capital. Sometimes it's easier to figure out what something will rent for, but if not, if we know what it costs and we can guess how fast it depreciates or appreciates, and we know the interest rate, we can then come back and figure out what the rental rate ought to be given that information. So because of rent-buy arbitrage, we don't have to ask the question whether it will be cheaper to buy or rent equipment. If there's what we call an efficient market where there's a lot of competition and a lot of arbitrage, it will not make a difference whether you rent or buy. On an annual basis, the cost will be the same. So that's an example of arbitrage and the implications of arbitrage. And there are many implications like that. It basically, you'll see the phrase, there's no such thing as a free lunch. No such thing as a free lunch. And if there are unexploited differences in price, remember arbitrage being exploiting a price discrepancy, if there is a price discrepancy sitting out there that can be exploited, then that's somewhat of a free lunch. And when we say there's no such thing as a free lunch, we're saying that somebody else will have come in and competed away the arbitrage opportunity, and the arbitrageurs will have eliminated the price discrepancy so that there's no such thing as a free lunch. That's it. See you next time.